Based on your knowledge on Afghanistan, do you think Taliban are willing for the peace process and they will reach a peace agreement with Afghan government while they continue violence for past few months?
Well, there certainly has not been a lot of evidence that they are willing to go and start the intra-Afghan negotiation. The agreement is, of course, not a peace agreement. It is a withdrawal agreement between the Taliban and the United States, setting out conditions, some of which remain secret, for the United States withdrawing part or all of its forces. So transforming this into inter-Afghan peace negotiations is something the Taliban does not seem to want to bring forward.
Pakistan said many times that they are pro-peace talks in Afghanistan. While there was some mortar shelling at the border area from Pakistan side to the Kunar province, and they're building a gate at the border area. Do you think this dual line conflict, which is a conflict between two countries, will help the peace talks, and is Pakistan also helping with that and supporting Afghanistan?
Pakistan is going to be very important in any agreement. The neighbors, the war inside Afghanistan has been going on for decades, but there is also the war with the neighbors, either involved directly or the neighbors are fighting with Afghan lives being lost to advance their own locations. Pakistan will be important to make, if the Taliban is ever to transition to inter-Afghan negotiations. Pakistan has its own security interests. Pakistan would love to see a settlement which recognizes the Durand line as an accepted border, but no Afghan government has said that. Even the Taliban emirate in the 1990s, who were heavily dependent on Pakistan. So the thing the United States needs to do, most importantly, is interact with Pakistan to get their support for peace. And this is going to be a lot harder now than it was in 2001.
Last week, U.S. forces handed 5 military bases to Afghan forces. General McKenzie assured Afghan president of U.S. long-term commitment. While there are other insurgent groups still active in Afghanistan and Taliban also targeting Afghan forces, do you think the troops reduction in Afghanistan impact the security in the region?
Yes, as long as the Taliban is committed to using violence against Afghan security forces and, most terrible of all, Afghan civilians, certainly withdrawing forces in the face of that action doesn't help move things to peace. That being said, as long as the U.S. is willing to stay committed, the troops are less important than the U.S. diplomatic engagement with Pakistan or with countries like Saudi Arabia or the Gulf stations, countries from where the Taliban draws its funds. Afghanistan has lots of fighting men who are committed to their country. What Afghanistan doesn't have is the diplomatic clout of the United States, still a superpower, and it needs that to provide, if you will, top cover for Afghanistan.
Russia has been paying bounties to Taliban to target U.S. forces, and also they were arming Taliban. Do you think this Russian interference drilled the U.S. efforts in struggle to reach a successful peace talks in Afghanistan?
It certainly doesn't help. The Russians and the other neighbors, including the Chinese, want the United States out of the region, which is a change from what was happened from the pre-2008, 2009. So they would like the Americans out of the region, and the Taliban would be fine, the Chinese would be fine. The Pakistanis, who used to try and balance out China, Saudi Arabia, and the US to help them in their security problems, are now looking largely exclusively as a future dominated by their support of China.
Yeah. Last question. The release of US Taliban prisoners as agreed in the peace agreement in February is going on, but Afghan government refused to release 600 Taliban prisoners with a criminal background, and they were plotting attacks on Afghanistan. Do you suggest US should push Afghan government for release of these prisoners?
I think they should push the Afghan government and the Taliban to start negotiating with these prisoners. Remember that the prisoner release were negotiated without the Afghan government at the table between the United States and the Taliban. So the Afghan government was not a party to the agreement, which is now requiring them to make the release. And they weren't able to set the conditions. No, these people are murderers. These people are narcotics producers. They don't get to go back. So since they didn't have that opportunity, let's start negotiating now. And this is something where other countries, I think one thing both the Afghan government and the Taliban needs, if possible, is a third party to sit down with them and is committed to make the transition, which is going to be hard for both sides.
Yeah, just one more question, since I have you with the expertise in intelligence on Iran. What's your thoughts about Iran and what Iran wants? They're also helping Taliban at the same time. You know, how is it relationship with the US? What is it that Iran wants from US leaving Afghanistan?
That is basically Iran, benefited from the defeat of the Taliban in 2001. They have no love for the Taliban, either politically, religiously, or diplomatically. But they would like the United States out of the region. They look at U.S. airfields in Afghanistan and would like those closed. So even though Iran in the past had been willing to cooperate with the U.S., with the international community, and still provides aid to Afghanistan, right now I think they're willing to look at anything that's going to get the U.S. out.
Yeah, and do you agree with Trump's defense strategy moving on towards Afghanistan?
No, I think it's very hard, but this is very important. America turned its back on Afghanistan in the 1990s, and that worked out very badly for the United States, for the world, and for Afghanistan. Every time I'm in Kabul, and I go into the stores in Shari now, I say, oh, will these endure if they, are just going to be destroyed like things were destroyed starting in 1992? I am very concerned.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. I hope we talk to you again. Thank you so much. Just let me